Aloha, good Wednesday morning to all of you. Thank you for those of you who already are here for tuning in today. Ryan, we've got two very important guests to talk about something that is really fundamental to all of us. That is Hawaii's economy and also Hawaii tourism.
Yeah, that's right. Tourism, of course, making headlines once again. We know just yesterday, Governor Ige, of course, announcing a way for travelers between inter-counties to bypass the current Safe Travels program through the validation of vaccination cards. And so we're going to be talking to John DeFries of the Hawaii Tourism Authority about how that will impact tourism overall for the local economy and beyond, about the impacts that tourism will have. But joining us first off is Mike McCartney, who's the director of DBEDT. He is in charge of helping the state diversify during this time. Good morning, Mike. Great to see you.
Good morning. Aloha.
Mike, I want to first start off. Let's talk a little bit about the overall plan for the state moving forward. We know that there has been a call for just a diversification of Hawaii's economy moving forward, away from a more reliance on tourism. What is DBED doing to help that initiative moving forward as we look to the future?
Well, the first thing we're doing to help facilitate that is for all of us to understand that public health and safety is number one, and community well-being is two, and then economic prosperity is three. So we've been learning how to stop fearing the virus and start respecting it. So you see our programs and plans that slowly start to open up from a local economy to a kama'aina economy, then going to Transpac and then international. And tourism is going to be still strategically very important because it provides so much opportunity for Hawaii, but we can manage it better, we can diversify it better, and we can create a new tourism 2.0, if you may say, to balance that. And as we go forward, we can leverage opportunities off of that, the same as military. So we're working hard to begin to diversify our economy. We got about a 9% unemployment rate, and we're looking at a number of programs that I'd be happy to talk about. But in general, we need to put in infrastructure like broadband, just like airports and highways. So the broadband initiative is going to be important so people can work from home, they can do commerce from small businesses, and we can compete and connect with the rest of the world. So the governor is going to have a strong broadband initiative along with the legislature, to ensure that not only the state gets broadband, but rural communities and communities everywhere, from students being able to learn to businesses being able to work and function.
Let's talk about that 9% that you referenced. 9% of our, of our population unemployed right now. The actual number could be, of course, even higher.
Yes.
Where have we seen the largest job losses, and how much of the job losses that we've seen are permanent? In other words, a business has shut down and it's just difficult for them to reopen.
I don't have specific data or numbers, but in my mind, there's no question it comes from the visitor sector. It comes from individuals who work in the tourism economy, whether they be in small business and retail or restaurants or attractions. Because when you go around the island, you see that there may be a lot of visitors there, but they're not open. A lot of places aren't open for business. Hotels aren't at 100%. We're tracking arrivals, and when you look at arrivals, the numbers seem high, but they're not necessarily going to hotels or traditional accommodations. So we're taking a look at that so we can maybe better enforce some of the vacation rentals that should not be in vacation rental, and ensure that we have a properly managed destination. And that's what HTA is going to be doing. And if we can make it through this legislative session, they need to be able to spend time on that and work with the counties to manage that destination. So you're seeing the unemployment rate, Sanji, happen primarily in the visitor industry sector, and that sector has been slow to grow, naturally because of the state of the economy and the ability for people to come here.
I wonder if we could spend a little bit more time talking about just the broadband access. I know that you mentioned it's going to be a big part of that, but what do those types of jobs actually look like? I mean, what type of additional revenue would that provide the state, and what opportunities may that provide for those here in our local economy to get jobs? What does that industry look like?
We are working on at DBED a study to better quantify that. We know going into the pandemic, there are approximately 39,000 people who actually classified themselves as working from home. This is before the pandemic. Throughout the pandemic, we see many individuals who have come to Hawaii who are actually working from long-term rentals, working for Fortune 500 companies. People have come home with their college classmates and they're living here now. And they're thinking about calling Hawaii home. They wake up at 4 o'clock, they finish at 2, they go surfing, and then they go sleep early. And then they get back up again and work in the morning and then go back to work. So I see people from doctors doing that. I have a couple of radiologists that I see them do that every day to hospitals across the country and providing that service, and they make quite a bit of money. I see people doing things like working for can manufacturing companies and making almost 6 figures being a manufacturer's rep and putting the reps together with the factory process and seeing that through right there from their home. And so there's all kinds of jobs that are out there. And I want to share with everyone, we have 4 programs that are going. We just signed an agreement with Amazon to provide Amazon training that may lead to a job. We signed an agreement with Movers and Shakas, which is a program to try to bring people to stay here in our hotels and work from those hotels and then be involved in the local community. We have this program called Flex Jobs, where we can, it's like a job search for people who want to have jobs online. And then we have a really interesting one that we hope to share a little later on called Instant Teams, where people have been accepted and are being paid a scholarship to be in a program. And once they graduate from this program, they are guaranteed jobs from Hawaii to work for Fortune 500 companies on the mainland. And once that first cohort is done, we're going to share that with you. So we're putting together a lot of data for Hawaii on what it means to telework. And you see that emerging around the world. And so we don't want to be left behind, and we want to position ourselves. We work closely with the Department of Labor and Workforce Development, and we're looking for those type of jobs and trying to connect the two together to give our people here in Hawaii the maximum opportunity to participate in that new digital economy that's emerging.
And sort of on that point, Paul's got a question this morning. He says, Mike, how do we transition our local workforce employed in service type jobs into other opportunities? The jobs that you're talking about in those programs obviously are definitely coveted and things that local folks here would want to be able to do, but they need training. And how do we help them make that move? Yeah,
we will. I think that's what these initial programs are about. We want to see their effectiveness. We think we can partner with people like Local 5 or the ILW, and they have great workforce programs, and we can partner with them to actually do those programs for their members and people related to that industry. I saw that happening from the ILWU when it came to bakers at Love's Bakery. They not only took care of the workers from Love's Bakery, they took care of all the managers and helped place managers into new types of jobs. And so it's pretty exciting to just see that emerge from the community. So at DBED, we want to be a facilitative catalyst to help make that happen. We don't want to just run programs and say, we're going to do it for you. We want to help the community create those programs, help match up the funding. And so it's like friends helping friends, people getting into those programs, and they're the ones that are going to help each other transform. It's kind of like how Lanai transformed from pineapple to Four Seasons. They did it, they learned a lot, and I think people in Hawaii are more resilient and capable than we think.
We know that a big part of just the overall growth of our economy and just the economy as a whole is tourism. And at this time, we'd like to actually bring in John DeFries into the conversation here. John, thank you so much for joining us. I want to first ask you right now, currently going through the legislature, there is a lot of talk about what HTA looks like moving forward, the funding of that. If you can update us on where we're at right now in the legislative process with some of the proposals to change and alter what HTA looks like moving forward.
Let me frame my comments by saying we have yet to receive the actual worksheets that have the details of some of the bills that have been passed, specifically the state budget bill. In large print and in conceptually, I know this. Unlike years past, where we receive a full allocation at HTA of $79 million we are anticipating that the legislature will send out a bill that will allocate something closer to $60 million for HTA. We typically annually through the TAT fund receive $16.5 million to operate and incentivize the meetings and convention market and operate the convention center. That number looks closer to 11.5. So by comparison, together we would typically get 95.5 million annually, and this year we're getting something closer to 71.5. So that's the current status of funding as I understand it. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock, Bill 862 will be in conference, and that bill has direct implications not only to the budget, but also to us operationally. As initially submitted by drafted by the Senate, it sought to remove certain statutory responsibilities, such as Hawaiian culture, such as governance, our ability to have our own board of directors function. And some of those structural changes probably concern me even more than the budget, because if it was adopted as initially drafted, it would essentially reduce HTA to a facilitator of marketing programs, which runs absolutely contrary to what HTA has heard from the community, the concern that the community has on adverse impacts in the natural environment, adverse impacts over time to cultural practices. And so I was very much encouraged by the strategic plan that the board adopted January 2020, and it is in keeping with the global trend of tourism repositioning itself in a more responsible way.
Let's talk about those numbers. When you did mention some pretty significant budget cuts, how will that hamper your ability to do for HTA to serve its function? Because I think the perception for a lot of people who don't really understand this agency is that basically you guys just put out television commercials telling people to come to Hawaii. But why does an agency like yours need that level of funding? And if you don't get it, what is lost?
A big part of marketing comes in educating the market, especially now. Two major things have changed during this pandemic. Our local sentiments as residents, after experiencing the adverse impact of losing the industry, losing jobs, the financial pain that created, it also gave us kind of a euphoric feeling that we got the islands back, we got our beach back, we got our trails back. And so the advent of reintroducing tourism is actually a issue that is divided, right? There are those that enjoy that privacy and having that place alone. However, it's not a sustainable scenario, right? So we're trying to strike a balance between how tourism is reintroduced and the sentiments of our residential community. To achieve that, there's quite a bit of market education that has to be invested in resetting the mindset of the visitor to be more aligned with our local values and the respect that we have for our natural environment, for each other, as well as for the Hawaiian culture. So those funds are deployed globally, most of it going to the United States of America, and the rest of it distributed throughout our world markets. So that's a costly undertaking, and these budget cuts will have implications along our ability to achieve that.
Mike, at the start or during the pandemic, we had a conversation on this program about what tourism would look like for Hawaii moving forward. And there was that talk of trying to target a different type of demographic to try to find those tourists that would spend more dollars here and concentrate on them rather than just the overall value of the amount, I should say, of people that are coming to the islands. What has the state done to really move forward and move on that needle to be able to push the clientele and the profile of the visitor to become different now that tourism is essentially open again?
I think that's exactly what John DeFries's plan, his Malama Hawaii plan is. And that's exactly the HTA's new plan with its 4 pillars. It's to respect the people, place, and culture of each island and to understand concept of George Kanahele, where, you know, if you have happy communities, you have happy visitors. And tourism in the 70s and 80s, you know, wasn't very well planned, and it just spread across the state. What John's plan takes into account is, you know, tourism belongs in resorts, and now they're creeping out into communities, and we need to hold the line on vacation rentals, and we need to partner with the different counties to say, we got to stop that. We need to educate visitors. We need to educate residents about what works and doesn't work and how to share. And so I think that there's a tremendous opportunity. We can still be that vacation place that does that. If, you know, I just want to remind everybody, it brought in $18 billion a year, 18% of our GDP, provided 200,000 jobs for Hawaii's people. You can't just turn it off and expect a new economy is going to emerge. You have to leverage this economy and create more jobs for local people, to run tour companies, to be part of the mix, to run, to be the businesses that are working with tourists. And that's what John's plan takes into account, to work with DBED. So I think the future is going to be a more diversified, balanced product as we go forward. And let us not forget, just as broadband is important to Hawaii, so is air access. And if we lose a lot of flights to Hawaii, Hawaii's people are going to lose flights. And it's going to cost us a lot of money to go to a few cities. Right now, we have over 1,000 flights per week from 53 cities by 20 plus airlines around the world. There's no other place 2,200 miles away from the nearest land with only 1.5 million people that has that kind of air access. We would lose that as Hawaii's people. So what John's plan is about is finding balance, to care for each other, to care for our visitors, to care for our land. And if we take care of that, we can find the new balance. It doesn't mean business as usual, but if we just cut their money off now, we're going to have more problems later on that we're going to have to fix in various communities where nobody was there to say, slow down, everybody.
Yeah, and John, to that point on balance, the governor was on here on Monday, and he, you know, one of the ideas that he floated was the possibility of reserving, you know, certain areas, state parks, for instance, for residents on the weekends and for visitors and everyone else during the week. Ingrid Peterson sort of revisiting that here, one of our viewers saying, I love the idea of opening some overused Mauka and Makai sites to residents only on weekends. Let Hawaii's people, especially the keiki, experience the beauties of our mountains and beaches. John, what's your view on that? Trying to restrict certain access, and you know, I would imagine that the visitors would not like that.
Well, you know, there's a general characteristic about travelers around the world, and that is when we go on vacation, every day is a weekend. But for the local community, every day is not a weekend. Saturdays and Sundays are. So if I'm a responsible and mindful traveler, I can go there on Monday through Friday. I don't have to go there on Saturday and Sunday. Okay, and so we're actually encouraging that conversation at the community level in a destination management action planning process that HTA is facilitating in every county, and encouraging that kind of thinking. Now, that's an important debate for the community itself to have, because if you're a retailer or a restaurant owner, you like that 7-day visitor traffic, okay? But if you're not, and you're just enjoying a Saturday and Sunday to rejuvenate with your family, you have to be able to look at this, because our resources are limited. The amount of space we have on an island is limited. And in tourism in particular, we're going to have to learn how to share it.
Yep.
And if it means, I actually encourage this idea. In fact, the governor and I have had that conversation. I've also initiated that conversation with DLNR as well.
Yep.
And it's been received well, and we just need to have the community engaged in making those decisions. But it's basically the equivalent of what the Hawaiians used to call a kapu system, where you're allowing the natural resource to regenerate, reproduce. So stay out of there, okay, at times of the year.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, and we have to be bold enough to be able to make those decisions. Mike?
Yeah. Sanji, we do that now. Kaneohe Bay, the Kaneohe Bay Master Plan, which was passed in the 1990s, There's no commercial activity on Sundays and federal and state holidays. That's for local people only. If you go to Polynesian Cultural Center on my side, they're closed. And so closing down for community things is not something new and something we should do more of. And I think that you're going to see John's plan call for that. And I think visitors respect communities. And if we share that, we're not going to have issues. But it's our job to put those in place and to educate visitors about that.
John, I want to get your reaction to the governor's announcement yesterday about the vaccination cards being used to bypass the Safe Travels program. How do you think that will impact the neighbor island communities and the overall economy, the local economy moving forward?
Yeah, we're hearing it this morning, right? It starts with your own family rejoicing and your neighbors, you know, and it is a very measured kind of incremental response to basically introducing this later to Trans-Pacific travel. You know, the state will do everything they can to make sure that counterfeit cards are not being deployed, and but I think it's a timely step at the right time. Work out the kinks at the local level, and then move toward broader expansion of that vaccination passport going forward.
John, I want to ask you, you know, how do we measure success in tourism? We know that the days of visitor arrivals and trying to rack up those numbers, that doesn't make the community happy, or many in our community, I would say. How do we know when we're doing it right?
You know, in that strategic plan that I keep referencing, there are 4 key performance indicators. Number 1, resident satisfaction. So we are currently increasing the number of times during the year. Going into our board meeting next week, we're going to make some recommendations that the annual resident satisfaction survey needs to be done twice, maybe 3 times a year. We're also taking a look at the nature of that survey and the quality of those questions. Resident satisfaction, visitor satisfaction. So that survey plays as important. Then we take a look at the average daily spending on a per person per day spend. Okay, to give you an example, in February of last year, pre-pandemic, that statistic was $201.20. This past February, it's $151.60. So we're down nearly a quarter, 25%. So we're looking at per person per day spending, and then of course total visitor spending. In the month of February back in 20, that was $1.46 million. This year, it's we ended the month of February with $385.3 million. So we're off in that area by about 73%. And February is the last month we've been able to calculate up until this point. So resident satisfaction, visitor satisfaction, per person per day spend, and total spending by the visitor are the 4 key indicators that we measure it by.
Mike, I want to bring up another topic. One of the things that we hear a lot of during our conversations with leaders, and specifically about tourism, is the education of the guests that are arriving. Many people are complaining that when they go to Waikiki and these tourist destinations, many people aren't wearing masks. A lot of these visitors are not respecting some of the rules that are in place that we have here in the state. What do you think the state can do to help to make sure that visitors are fully understanding what these rules are? Does that look like more enforcement or education, or what do you think the state needs to do to help to educate visitors as they make their arrival to Hawaii?
Ryan, I would be on the side of more education, you know, not just on the plane, but on the ground everywhere. But what I am noticing, and I would urge people to go through Waikiki, is that many, if not a majority of our visitors are wearing masks. I think it's when you start getting to the beach or the park and you see everyone mixing there before they go in the water, there's a lot of people without masks. But what I have personally seen is a lot of visitors following the rules. And that is heartwarming to see. And I think everyone needs reminders, including our local community, on that. We need to remind ourselves to be the example, and we got to do it just as much if we want them to follow our lead.
You know, John, you mentioned resident satisfaction, and one of the things that Hawaii, of course, traffics in is that intangible, right? The aloha spirit, and that is something that our visitors enjoy when they come here. But, you know, as we've talked about throughout this program, there is this growing tension between the local community and the people who are coming. How do we boost that resident satisfaction? How do we make people, you know, I mean, it's hard to manufacture aloha, but how do we, you know, develop that and cultivate that so that people will continue to want to come here and be higher spending tourists?
Well, one of the things you don't do is cut my budget. cut HTA's budget. But having said that, I think it is about us educating the visitor, going back to Mike's point, and educating the local resident, because when you generate as an industry over $2 billion in tax money, state tax money, that's the equivalent of the Department of Education's budget, okay? 600 million of that coming through the transient accommodation tax, or TAT, there, and the jobs that it creates. That's one side of us being able to meet resident expectation. The flip side of it is when we're having to engage and share our open spaces in particular, right? Once the visitor leaves their hotel or accommodation, and now having to commingle with that, we're just going to have to do a better job in educating our visitor on that. And I will tell you that I share Mike's observations about the mask wearing, but there's another thing I'm coming to recognize. Right now, it's primarily the U.S. market, because our international markets, due to their national policies, are not coming into Hawaii at this time. So we're going into the summer with primarily the U.S. market. This is not we all know this is not the same America that it was 2 years ago, 4 years ago. There's an attitude change. There is a feeling of being emboldened. There are all of these characteristics that you and I see on nightly news. The negative side of what's happening in the fragmentation of our country. And I'm beginning to see that attitude, right? I don't have to wear a mask because back in Texas, we don't wear a mask. I don't have to do this. And then some of these sentiments that bear a racial tinge are not going to go over well here at all. And those kind of things concern me. And you've seen a couple of incidents in the recent weeks where local people have been confronted in some very uncomfortable, conflictive scenarios. And those kinds of things, frankly, is what keeps me up at night, because enforcement is going to be needed, but education is nonstop.
You know, our time, unfortunately, is wrapping up here, but we did want to provide an opportunity for each of you to have maybe just a closing statement or a closing thought. Mike, I want to start off with you as we look towards what Hawaii looks like moving out of this pandemic and what the future for the economy looks like. What is your overall final thought about what that future looks like?
Thank you, everyone. My final thought is that this is the pivot point, the point where we have the opportunity, as the governor said, to change the trajectory of Hawaii so that our children can choose to call Hawaii home. And so there's a lot of challenging, tough, different decisions that we have to make here. And to me, they really fall into three boxes. Make sure we maintain public health, community well-being, and make sure that the communities are okay. And then number three, economic prosperity. And it's a balanced approach. And what we do together, not just government alone, will change that trajectory of Hawaii and create the new Hawaii that we're going to leave to our children's children. So this is that moment where COVID is unfortunate, but it's also accelerated many things. And it's now our time to create the future that's going to start emerging. And we call that Hawaii 2.0.
And John, for you, a final thought moving forward, knowing what's ahead of you and maybe some of the uncertainty, of course, right now with the legislature going on right now as it wraps up as well. But your final thoughts about tourism moving forward.
You know, when I came to HTA, I came with an organizing principle. That principle is called Malama, to care for, to protect. Malama ku'uhome. Everybody that's in this conversation has an intimate connection with Hawaii as our homeland. And so the things that we love are the things that we care for. And I'm relying on the resilience of our Hawaii people their love connection with their homeland, really to help give voice to the direction that tourism takes in the next 3 to 5 years as we come back to scale. It is not going to be the same visitor industry it was when I first entered it. And we have a tremendous opportunity to meet a demand in the world for a destination that cares for its people, cares for its INA, cares for its oceans, and it has its mind set on providing the best opportunities for the generations that lay ahead of us.
Well, John DeFries and Mike McCartney, thank you both so much for your time this morning. We know you're very busy, and we really do appreciate you joining us for this conversation.
Mahalo.
Ryan, very interesting to hear about the pivot, and I was surprised that they both said that they embraced the governor's suggestion that perhaps certain areas should be limited to allow more access to residents, and perhaps a little bit limiting some access for visitors, because as John DeFries said, when you're on vacation, every day is a weekend, but that's not the case for us here at home. So interesting to know that that is being talked about as a real possibility moving forward.
Yeah, but again, going to what he said as well with that comment, it really is about that community and what they want, and allowing those communities to have an active voice in that. And it seems like that is the approach of the HTA moving forward, is they do want to really engage the community and make sure that those concerns that we're hearing along social media and all these other reports of that sentiment by many local residents about some of their anger towards tourism starting up again. It's really about finding that balance, and his hands may be tied moving forward, knowing that the legislature may be cutting a significant part of their budget, as well as restructuring what HTA looks like into more of a marketing arm through various bills that are currently moving through the legislature at this time. And so we should find out in a couple of days or into next week what that will look like moving forward, and how the legislature could help to craft what the HTA looks like moving forward, ultimately also helping to dictate how tourism looks for the state moving forward.
Yeah, really interesting, because we focus so much attention on the budget cuts, but it's the restructuring that John DeFries says that he's very concerned about. Also interesting to note, if you happen to miss the top of the broadcast, make sure you go back, because Mike McCartney did lay out a number of initiatives that the state is taking to really help to change the economic profile. 9% unemployed. How do we get those folks back to work, and where they go back to work? The state hoping to help to make those transitions a little easier for local folks.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's a bunch of exciting new initiatives and projects that the state is looking to launch that will allow people to work remotely. He talked about some partnerships that they've established with Amazon, as well as some other key programs that will help to move that state in that direction. And we'll see what that looks like, of course, knowing, as he said, tourism is not something that we can just kind of change overnight and move everything to another industry or another type of economy moving forward. It's going to take some time and some planning. And so, as Mike said, it's a pivotal moment right now, a pivot point for the state, knowing how to make those adjustments. So a great conversation. Encourage those of you who came in late to watch it from the beginning.
Absolutely. And on Friday, we are going to be shifting our focus back to healthcare and the vaccine. We're going to be talking to the head of AARP, Kaylee Lopez, about some challenges that folks in her organization have been having, and what steps they're taking to help facilitate to make sure that enough of their members are getting vaccinated, and also other challenges with scam alerts and whatnot. And also Hilton Rathel of a Healthcare Association of Hawaii. Of course, they help to represent all of the hospitals in our state. So how is that vaccine rollout going? And we want to also talk about some interesting programs that are being rolled out to really do outreach, especially on the neighbor island, where the vaccine essentially comes to you if you happen to live in a place where you don't have a hospital just down the street.
Yeah, vaccine rollout, of course, continuing on here in the state and really throughout the country. And so we'd be great to get an update from both of them of how their efforts are going in each of the areas that they work specifically with. We want to thank all of you for tuning in once again, and encourage all of you to tune back here on Friday at 10:30 for another edition of Spotlight Hawaii. Until then, take care and aloha.
Aloha.